Okay, everyone. So here we are again, and we're coming back to this sutta, the Kaya Gata Sati Sutta, the mindfulness directed to the body. And we're going to finish this off and look at some of the conclusion statements about the benefits of the sutta, the benefits of this kind of practice. So we'll just carry on with some of these similes and see where this takes us. So, next simile. Suppose a water jar was placed on a stand, empty and hollow. Then a person comes along with a load of water. What do you think, monastics? Could that person pour water into the jar? Yes, sir. In the same way, when a mendicant has not developed or cultivated mindfulness of the body, Mara finds a vulnerability and gets hold of them. So this is kind of nice, yeah, this idea that you have is like a water jar. If it's empty, there's nothing inside, you can fill water into the jar. In a similar way, when you have developed your mindfulness and you are directing your mindfulness in the right way, it is as if you are complete, you are psychologically complete. There is no part of you, psychologically speaking, that is vulnerable or empty or hollow, but you are full within yourself. Yeah, you feel a sense of completion within yourself. And this is one of the characteristics, for example, of metta practice or karuna practice and these kind of things. If you have a very strong loving kindness or compassion for the world, it's like you feel complete within. There is no gap. There is no kind of sense of craving because there is a gap inside of you. Craving is always because we don't feel complete inside of us. So we crave things in the world. We go out into the world to fill that kind of gap that we feel within. So when we have full mindfulness of the body, or we have good metta practice or karuna practice, we feel complete. Yeah, it's not as if we don't need anything more to feel complete. It's the opposite of craving. Craving when we demand something more to fill us up. So when you have that need to be filled up by something outside, that is when desire comes. That is when desire arises. This is why Mara has an opportunity when you don't feel that sense of psychological completion. Yeah, you are hollow inside, like this hollow vessel, and that's why you have a problem. But when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, Mara cannot find a vulnerability and doesn't get hold of them. Suppose a person were to throw a light ball of string on a door panel made entirely of heartwood. What do you think, mendicants? Would that light ball of string find an entry into that door panel made entirely of hardwood? No, sir. In the same way, when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, Mara cannot find a vulnerability and doesn't get hold of them. It's again, it's this idea like you have armor outside of you. You have like a shield. Yeah, the shield is here, the shield of the hardwood, the door panel. And so Mara cannot penetrate. There's no way of getting access to you because you have this shield. And that is the fullness of the fullness of the mind. The mind is complete. There's nothing missing there. Suppose there were a green, sappy log. Then a person comes along with a drill stick, thinking to light a fire and produce heat. What do you think, monastics? By drilling the stick against the green, sappy log on dry land far from water, would they light a fire and produce heat? No, sir. In the same way, when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, Mara cannot find the vulnerability and doesn't get hold of them. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. No heat can be produced. No desire can be produced. No ill will can be produced because you have kind of dried out. It's almost as if all those excess desires or whatever, they have been dried out of you. So there's no longer any access there. The flame cannot come. There can be no spark. There can be no agitation of the mind, like the flame and the spark of desire, etc., like we talked about before. Suppose a water jar was placed on a stand full to the brim so that a crow could drink from it. Then a person comes along with a load of water. What do you think, mendicants? Could that person pour water into the jar? No, sir. In the same way, when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, Mara cannot find the vulnerability and doesn't get hold of them. You are full within yourself. You don't have any needs. You don't have any lacks inside by which Mara can access you, by which Mara can cause desire to arise. There's no need for you to have any desires anymore. Desires are completely abandoned. When a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, they become capable of realizing anything that can be realized by insight to which they extend the mind in each and every case. Yeah, so this idea here is the idea that anything that can be realized by insight refers to everything on the Buddhist path. It refers to the deep insights of becoming an arahant, or you could say the 4 stages of awakening. It refers to which I'll see in a second, refers to the jhana stages, but it also refers to all the supernormal powers. Yeah? So if you want some kind of fancy supernormal power, then this can happen through this way. So if you fully cultivate the mindfulness of the body, then this is what's going to happen. So this is what comes next. First of all, a few similes. Suppose a water jar was placed on the stand, full to the brim, so a crow could drink from it. If a strong man was to pour it on any side, would water pour out? Yes, sir. In the same way, when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, they become capable of realizing anything that can be realized by insight to which they extend the mind in each and every case. So when the jar is full, it is like it is overflowing. Yeah, it is like it's almost as if the mind kind of is already full in its own right, and it flows over into the world and is capable of kind of grasping that larger reality which comes from deep insight and a deep understanding of what is going on. You're not limited to yourself, you kind of goes into the world in a very broad sense. Suppose there was a square walled lotus pond on level ground, full to the brim so a crow could drink from it. If a strong man was to open the wall on any side, would water pour out? Yes, sir. In the same way, when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, they become capable of realizing anything that can be realized by insight to which they extend the mind in each and every case. So the idea of the overflowing mind, the mind overflows and then it goes into the world and it stretches beyond kind of the ordinary experience that you may have. And then comes the last simile here, which is a kind of standard simile in the sutras, which is quite maybe more, to my mind, more meaningful in this case. Suppose a chariot stood harnessed to thoroughbreds at a level crossroads with a goad ready. Then a deft horse trainer, a master charioteer, might mount the chariot, taking the reins in his right hand and the goad in the left. He would drive out and back wherever he wishes, whenever he wishes. In the same way, when a mendicant has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, they become capable of realizing anything that can be realized by insight, to which they extend the mind in each and every case. So this is the idea that the mind becomes like your instrument. The mind becomes like this charioteer. As it says in the Suttas, the mind becomes pliable and workable, and you can use the mind in any way that you wish. The mind is very sharp, it is very alert, and whatever you say to the mind does just that. Yeah, but if you are an ordinary person, if you are not Arya, if you're not an Arahant, very often, whatever you want to do, you can't do it. If you tell your mind to have metta, the mind still doesn't have metta. Yeah, the mind still gets upset about things. If you want the mind not to think about anything, you say, be quiet in meditation. I don't want to think anything. Still, the mind thinks things in meditation. Yeah. If you want to have no ill will, still you have ill will. If you don't want to have any desires, still you have desires. In other words, the mind is not under your control. The mind is flowing along according to causes and conditions. And this is such a big problem in life. These causes and conditions that we talk about here, these are the habits that we have in our life. These are the ways we have been conditioned from previously in this life and maybe also previously in past lives. And all of this conditioning, all of the habits that we have, this is what controls your mind. This is what controls us. This is what makes us do all of these kind of things. And sometimes we are almost helpless. It is actually so hard to be able to control this because the habits are so strong. And there's almost nothing that we can do about it. And this is one of the reasons why it is so important to have compassion for yourself. Every one of us, we need to have compassion for ourselves and also compassion for others, because we are not really free. We are trapped by the habits of our mind. We are trapped by, as I like to say, our personality. Our personality is just a habit that has been formed from the past. And it's very hard to get out of those habits and get out of that personality. You cannot step out of your personality, right? If I tell you to step out of your personality, you think that I'm crazy because it's impossible. But your personality, what is it? It is just the conditioning that comes from the past. It is not anything more than that. So we are trapped, and so one of the things that we are trying to do on the Buddhist path is to release that trap, to get out of the trap, to recondition ourselves, to stop all these conditionings from always bullying us and forcing us around in various ways. This is what the path, large part of the path is about. And one day you start to feel more mindful. And one of the qualities of the mindfulness, this is a quality that is mentioned very often in the suttas, it is said to be adipateya. And adipateya means like mindfulness is like, it is like a lord. It is a power that controls you. It's a controlling faculty. So sati adipateya means that you are controlled by mindfulness. So when mindfulness becomes very strong, when you are aware of what is happening around you, when you are aware of what is happening in your mind, when you speak, when you act, but especially in the mind, it means that you can change the direction. You can stop yourself from getting angry. You can stop yourself from having certain desires, because you can turn in time. And this is the power of sati. So once you start to have mindfulness, you start to get this chariot. You start to get the chariot under control. The chariot here in the simile is like your mind. Suppose the chariot is harnessed. You start to get control over that chariot. You start to be able to move it according to how you want to move it. You're holding the reins, you're holding the goad. You know how to drive the chariot. And then as you progress further in meditation, as you reach samadhi, your control of the mind is even more powerful. It starts to become very powerful. And this other expression in the suttas is that you are samadhi adipateya. You are controlled through samadhi, because samadhi means a mind which is very powerful, it is very present, it is very peaceful, and you have a feeling that you are in charge of your life. It's like you have the power inside, the energy inside, which enables you to take charge of your own life. So with every step on this path, the ability to control your own life, to feel in charge of yourself, increases and increases and increases. And this is one of the very beautiful things about the Buddhist path. And maybe it is a thing that people don't often quite understand, that ordinarily in our life, we are not really in charge. Yeah, we are being pushed around and bullied around by our habits coming from the past, by all the conditioning coming from the past. And it feels like your life is a little bit out of control. Yeah, your mind is so incredibly heavily conditioned. But then as you practice this path, as you give rise to all of these qualities, it is as if you become more independent. Yeah, you become more able to think and do and use the mind in the appropriate way. It's a beautiful aspect of this path. And we don't understand how dependent we are, how much we are a slave in our ordinary life, and how unfree we are. If we understood how unfree we are and how much we are of slaves, we would rebel. Yeah, we would get to a monastery and ordain straight away, because we understand that the importance of getting out of this slavery. We are trapped in the world around us. It's a terrible situation to be in. So you develop all these qualities, and as you develop them, you become more and more free. You become a master of your own destiny. You become a master of your own mind. You can turn your mind almost anywhere you want. And this is what is happening here. Yeah, you take the reins of the chariot. You take the reins of your mind. You direct the mind wherever you want to go. You use the goad. The goad is like like a whip or something, or something you prick the horses with to make the horses go in the right way. And you make the chariot move as you wish. You take the mind to all of these incredible states that are possible to realize within the teachings. So you have foundation is there. You are ready to realize anything you want, because your mind is incredibly powerful, especially if you have all the 4 jhanas. So let's have a look at these things that can be realized in this way once the chariot is ready, and we can use the chariot in the right way. So have a look at the outcome of this. And the Buddha says you can expect 10 benefits when mindfulness of the body has been cultivated, developed, and practiced, made a vehicle and basis, kept up, consolidated, and properly implemented. So the idea here with this is simply that if you want to develop mindfulness of the body, so it actually has all of these 10 benefits, you have to really practice it fully. Yeah, half measures are never going to work. You have to take it all the way to the logical conclusion of the mindfulness of the body. So you have to really cultivate it all the way, and only then does it actually have these benefits. It is not an easy kind of thing to do. It takes time. It needs commitment, it needs practice, and then it will have these benefits. So all of these words just mean that you're really putting it into practice 100%. So the first one is that you prevail over desire and discontent, and you live having mastered desire and discontent whenever they arise. So the idea here is that if there is any discontent in your mind, any kind of desires, any problems in the mind, you have full mastery of that. You know how to block it, you know how to stop it, you know how to deal with it before it becomes a problem. And this is the idea here, the first idea of the cultivation of the mindfulness of the body here. So that's a very kind of basic idea, or it seems like it is basic, but it is incredibly useful, because very often in life, the problem in life is often that we are not quite content, feeling restless, not really knowing what to do with ourselves sometimes. We have this underlying desire, not really knowing what the problem is. There's a discontent, a dissatisfaction that sometimes is very hard to pin down. If you practice the mindfulness of the body, you lose that. You don't have that anymore. that is extraordinarily useful in its own right. It means that you're never really discontent. Yeah, it means that your mind is always directed in a positive way, feeling that you have a sense of purpose. Life has a sense of meaning. You're going in a certain direction. The second one here is that you prevail over fear and dread. You live having mastered fear and dread whenever that arises, whenever these things arise. So fear and dread, this is any kind of fear you may have in your life. Yeah, let's say that you stay at Bodhinyana Monastery and they put you in the kuti far away in the forest, and you can't see anyone. All you can hear is the sounds of the night, the rustling of the leaves, the kangaroo jumping outside of your kuti. And it's very scary when you hear a kangaroo. Sometimes the kangaroos, they walk. And when a kangaroo walks, it sounds exactly like a person. Yeah. So you think that is a person coming to your kuti, but no, it's just a kangaroo. And it's very easy to get afraid. Yeah. One of the remarkable things when you read the suttas, there's that sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya called the Fear and Dread Sutta. And in the sutta, the Buddha talks about his own practice before his awakening experience, when he was still like a bodhisattva, or he was trying to find awakening in his life. And this was the Buddha to be. This is, the great spiritual master of human history. And he says, when he was practicing alone in the forest, far away from human beings, he too was experiencing this fear and dread. This is almost like a natural, very natural human emotion to have when you are in a dangerous, what seems like a dangerous situation. So if you want to overcome that completely, mindfulness of the body is sufficient. Yeah, you are complete within yourself. You have powerful mindfulness. Although these defilements cannot penetrate anymore, you have the armor around you, and you're ready to deal with all of these kind of things. You can endure cold, heat, hunger, and thirst. You can endure the touch of flies, mosquitoes, the touch of the wind, the sun, and reptiles, or creeping animals. So maybe also insects as well, that was mentioned the other day. You can deal with rude and unwelcome speech. You can put up with physical pain, sharp, severe, acute, unpleasant, disagreeable, and life-threatening. Yeah, so you have incredible endurance because your mind is very strong. Your mind is very clearly in the present. You don't give rise to desires anymore. You see your body merely as a conglomeration of elements, and you have withdrawn any interest from the body because you're not really interested in the body. The body you're not really worried about the body anymore. And because you're not worried about the body, all of these things that we are seeing here, because they affect the body, you can just watch it as if it has nothing to do with you. Even physical pains, yeah, we all know how strong physical pains can be sometimes. There are certain things that you can have in life that give extremely strong physical pains, like kidney stones, yeah, or maybe some kind of when you go to the dentist sometimes, if they drill down into the nerves, or there are certain, maybe childbirth, I don't know, there are many things that can be very, very painful in life. And yet all of these things you can deal with. You can just stand back, you can watch it, because you no longer have any interest in this. You can also deal with rude and unwelcome criticism. You know how to deal with other people in the world. That's kind of interesting here, yeah? It's almost as if that mindfulness enables you to control the mind regardless of what happens. So this is already incredibly useful. Yeah, if all of us were able to deal with life in this way, we would already be a long way on the path. We would already be have incredibly good lives. If all of these things wasn't a problem anymore, boy, that's already incredibly useful. But of course, the results go far, far beyond this. And from now on, we come to the more profound aspects, the deeper aspects of the benefits of mindfulness of the body. So let's have a look at some of those deeper aspects. You get the 4 jhanas, the 4 absorptions, blissful meditations in the present life that belong to the higher mind when they want, without trouble or difficulty. Yeah, so the jhanas become yours, and of course, a very large part of the reason why the jhanas become accessible to you is because you have given up attachment to the body. The body is the biggest hindrance for attaining jhana states, because the body also includes the 5 senses, and that 5 sense world with the body, we are very attached to that. So by weakening that attachment, by letting go of the whole world of the 5 senses, including the body, then samadhi becomes accessible. Samadhi is only difficult because we are holding on to the world of the 5 senses. And this is why it is often so useful to recollect this, to remember the downside of the world, to remember that the world is out of control, to remember that your body is in large part out of control. You don't know what's going to happen to the body next. You don't know what your next experience will be. And the more you access, the more understanding you gain of all of these things, the easier it is to enter samadhi and get the jhanas as a consequence. And this is where it really starts to become very interesting. Because if you can get access to the jhanas, if you can get access to samadhi, it means that you have a bliss, you have a happiness greater than you have ever had in your entire life before. You are beyond the ordinary world. You enter a different reality that gives you access to something far superior to anything you ever had before. So this is where it gets really interesting, and you really start to see the powerful benefits of mindfulness gone to the body. But you will also notice here, I just want to maybe mention this in passing, is that once again, the jhanas are said to be the outcome, a benefit of the practices of mindfulness of the body. Yeah, and before, the jhanas were included in the mindfulness of the body. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's as if the jhanas have been added to mindfulness of the body by mistake. These are the benefits. They are not the practices to be done. So again, it shows us that sometimes the suttas get a little bit, a few things have been added to the suttas that don't actually make sense. And sometimes we have to stand back a little bit and have a look at what actually is going on. Okay, let's go to the next one. They wield the many kinds of psychic powers, multiplying themselves and becoming one again. They control the body as far as the Brahma world. So these are the many kinds of psychic powers, and it's actually quite a nice little paragraph about the psychic powers. And let me just see if I can find all the psychic powers for you, because it's kind of exciting to hear about the psychic powers. I kind of enjoy it myself sometimes. So let me just see if I can bring up the psychic powers for you. It's going to be a little bit hard. Okay, let me just see if I can remember them approximately, what the psychic powers are. Yeah, so the psychic powers are first of all, being one, you become many. Yeah, so you can multiply yourself into 1,000 people and get 1,000 bobbies. So imagine having 1,000 bobbies. That would be very interesting. But fortunately, the good thing is that after being 1,000, you can become one again afterwards. So you don't become 1,000 and then you are stuck with being 1,000. You can always come back again afterwards. That's kind of the good thing about it. And then it says you can walk through a wall. Yeah, you can walk through a rampart. A rampart are like the big kind of wall, big kind of earth mounds you found around the cities in the old days to keep the enemies away. You can walk through a mountain, yeah, if you want to. You can walk through a mountain, imagine that. You can walk on the water. Yeah, this is all found in the suttas. You can walk on the water. So they say that Jesus Christ walked on the water, but the Buddhists walked on the water long time before Jesus Christ. Yeah, we have this a long time before. Maybe the story of Jesus Christ walking on the water, maybe it originates from the suttas. Some people said that that story may originally have come from the suttas, because the Buddhists who did it a long time before. Anyway, you can fly through the air like a bird. Yeah, you hear this story sometimes, like levitation and flying through the air. And then at the very end here comes this idea that you can control the body as far as the Brahma world. And the body here means, again, it doesn't mean the physical body, because the physical body we have here cannot go to the Brahma world. What it means is that you can take yourself to the Brahma world, and it may be an astral body or something like that. But somehow you can go to the Brahma world if you want to, and you want to hang out with Brahma for a while and say hello to Brahma. How are you, Brahma? How is it going? What are you up to these days? Yeah, you want to hang out with Brahma for a while? And Brahma will say, yeah, these days I'm practicing loving kindness. I used to practice compassion, now I'm practicing loving kindness. How are you going? Oh yeah, I'm doing mindfulness of the body. Maybe that's what happens in the Brahma world. I don't know. Anyway, so you wield the many kinds of psychic power. This is called a benefit here. I'm not sure exactly why this is beneficial. I guess it means you can do all kind of weird things. It's kind of cool, right? These kind of psychic powers. I'm not sure exactly why they're called benefits here, but never mind. It's still interesting at the very least. Let's go on to the next one. With clairaudience that is purified and superhuman, you can hear both kinds of sound, human and divine, whether near or far. So you can hear things, yeah, maybe because your mind is very broad. You can maybe send your mind out, and then you can hear things far away. You can hear the devas when the devas go chatting to each other. You can see what the devas are talking about. What do you think the devas are talking about? What do you think? Anything? Do you think there's anything interesting? Are they talking about Dhamma? Or are they talking about sensual pleasures? Or are they talking about God? What are they talking about, do you think, the devas? And I think, you know what the answer is? I think the answer is they are pretty much like human beings. Yeah, the devas, they will talk about, just like us, the majority will talk about indulging in sensual pleasures. Oh, the Deva world is so wonderful. Have you tried this latest ambrosia, the latest food of the Devas? Yeah, have you all? How many? And I'm sure in Devaloka you have all of these nymphs. Yeah, you have 1,000 wives, and maybe if you're a woman, you have 1,000 husbands. I don't know if that's the case. So you have all of this excess of everything. Yeah, everything is very beautiful and powerful. So you become very indulgent as a devas. I'm sure they talk about sensual pleasures a lot. But then the devas are also spiritual. Yeah, there are some of the devas are Buddhist. So they will talk about the suttas and they will discuss how to be kind, just like we are doing now. You find this in Devaloka as well. And then you find devas who are Christians. Yeah, and maybe the Christian devas, they will maybe pray to God, just like we are praying to God. Or some people are praying to God anyway. Maybe there are some Muslim devas, and maybe there are some atheist devas, all kinds of devas, just like the human realm. It's just a more glorified way of existing, but basically they are the same as human beings. So when you hear the devas talking, after a while you think, oh, this is really boring, just like hearing the humans. Okay, enough, I'm not interested in this anymore. And then you go to the next superpower after that, because that superpower becomes boring. And the next one is you understand the mind of others, beings and individuals, having comprehended them with your own mind. So you can read the minds of others. And I don't know if that is good or bad. I think if you are a teacher, if you're going to teach others, then maybe being able to read someone's mind can be very handy, because then you can help them maybe or guide them in the right way. But if you are an ordinary human and you start to read other people's minds, I think it is terrible. Yeah, it is like there's so much junk that people think. So when you kind of hear other people thinking, you think, oh no, I really don't want to hear this, because just like our minds, yeah, if you look at your own mind, would you like to have your content of your own mind broadcast to the whole world? Would you like everyone in the world to know exactly what you are thinking? That would be scary, right? Imagine if you had like this screen above your head and every thought you have gets written on the screen so the whole world can read exactly what you're thinking. That would be kind of scary, right? I wouldn't want that. That would be too much. Of course, when you live with Ajahn Brahm, you can never be entirely sure if someone is reading your mind or not. But well, still, it is not the kind of nice thing. And because most people are like this, and many people are worse than us, they have even worse thoughts than we have. Yeah, maybe they think about murdering others or stealing and all kind of nasty things. I don't know. Actually, reading people's minds is not very interesting. It's only nice if you have to be a teacher and you have to teach others. So anyway, but it's possible according to the Buddhism. And one of the interesting things about reading people's minds is that there are many ways of doing this. Yeah, and the suttas talk about 4 different ways of reading someone's mind. And the most simple way of reading someone's mind is just to observe that person. And if you observe a person carefully, you can tell largely what the content of their mind is. Yeah, if someone is kind of really rushing around, and you can look at the face and you know straight away this person is angry. Yeah, because they have a frown on their face. The kind of the way they're behaving. They don't even have to talk. You know straight away. Or if someone is very calm and they have a big smile on the face, you feel a sense of metta, maybe a sense of kindness being present in this person. Yeah. So a lot we can tell just by looking at the person. We can actually know the content of the minds. So we are all mind readers in a certain way, yeah, because we're always guessing the content of other people's mind through their conduct. So it's already happening to some extent. Anyway, it is possible to do. I guess this is the main point here. And now come the really interesting ones. These are the ones that really matter. And these are the things that have real spiritual significance. Yeah, you can recall the many kinds of past lives with all the features and details. And this is incredibly important and incredibly useful, because when you recall the past lives, that is when you start to understand the idea of dukkha. You start to understand suffering. Because suffering really is expressed, yeah, in this way, in this kind of eternal round, going around and around, going from one life to the next one. So this is incredibly powerful. So if you can recall your past lives, and you can do that because of your contemplation of the body, or mindfulness directed to the body, then you have an incredibly powerful way of understanding the Dhamma. This is really understanding the Dhamma in a very deep way. This is where it comes back to the path again. This is no longer incidental to the path. This is no longer an addition that isn't required. This is a core aspect of the Buddhist path. And then with clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman, they see sentient beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, in a good place and in a bad place. They understand how sentient beings are reborn according to their deeds, according to their karma. This is the other very important insight that you can have as you practice the path. Seeing, understanding the law of karma, how when you live well, you get reborn in a good place. When you live badly, you get reborn in a bad place. You understand the structure of samsara. You understand how samsara always works. Yeah, how you move from one existence to another one. And there is no way out, because we're always making karma. We're always moving on to something else. And this is kind of the problem with this kind of samsaric existence. I'm going through this quite fast because the purpose here is not to discuss all of these high things. The purpose is really just to have a quick look at the benefits of the mindfulness going to the body. So then we come to the last one there. Yeah, you realize the undefiled freedom of the heart, the freedom by wisdom in this very life. And they live having realized it with their own insight due to the ending of the defilements. So So this is the becoming a arahant, yeah, when you reach the highest wisdom on the Noble Eightfold Path, and all the ending of the defilements. And this too, yeah, becoming an arahant here is said to be one of the benefits of contemplating the body. So this is very fascinating, yeah, and very interesting how far you can go with body contemplation. Of course, one of the most important aspects of this body contemplation is the mindfulness of breathing. So remember that the mindfulness of breathing is really core to this whole thing. And the sutta on the mindfulness of breathing, the Anapanasati Sutta, is also takes you all the way to becoming an arahant. Yeah? So these are all very tied together. And Anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing, is really the critical thing here that ties everything together and is the critical meditation practice that takes you all the way to the end of the path in this way. So, the Buddha says you can expect these 10 benefits when mindfulness of the body has been cultivated, developed, and practiced, made a vehicle and basis, kept up, consolidated, and properly implemented. That is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the mendicants were happy with what the Buddha said. So, that is the Kaya Gata Sati Sutta for you. Very beautiful, in many ways, very interesting sutta. It's the first time I teach this sutta on a retreat, so it's quite nice to be able to do it. And remember that the main kind of emphasis of this sutta, and this is also the main emphasis you find in the Satipatthana Sutta, is that breath meditation is one of the core meditations that we should be dealing with. And secondly, if you find that you have some attachments to the body, some attachments that stop you from going very deep in your meditation, then the way to overcome that is to do a little bit of body contemplation. Yeah, 31 parts of the body, the 4 elements, maybe specifically. And when you do that, then you are on the right track. Yeah, and also the idea of the mindfulness and clear comprehension, the situational awareness, and the 4 postures. These are preliminary practices that lead you to be able to do mindfulness of breathing later on. Okay, so there you are. Sutta 90 Tang. Sutta is finished. So I hope you are satisfied like the monastics were. And now we can go on to the next sutta. So this sutta is another well-known sutta, and this is spoken by Venerable Sariputta. Venerable Sariputta, of course, was the Buddha's right-hand monk. Yeah, so very important part of the Sangha. And it is kind of interesting when Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana, when they had died, yeah, after they passed away, the Buddha said that the Sangha seems empty now that they have passed away. Yeah, so it's almost as if the Buddha really recognized the preeminent spiritual qualities of Venerable Sariputta and Mahamoggallana to the point that the Sangha seemed empty, even to the Buddha. So you can imagine, even if you are an arahant, you still sometimes you can perceive that's you perceive the changes of things. It's not that the Buddha was sad, it's not that the Buddha was grieving, but merely noting the emptiness that was left behind when 2 such powerful people passed away. So it was almost like the Buddha's appreciation of these 2 teachers. And for this reason, you find that some of the most deepest and most powerful suttas in the Pali Canon, of course, most of them are taught by the Buddha, but some of them are taught by Venerable Sariputta, especially Venerable Sariputta. He is like an expert in giving a detailed expositions and all of these kind of things. And in this sutta, that is exactly what we see. We see Venerable Sariputta giving a detailed exposition on the 4 elements that we have just been talking about before. So now hopefully we will get some clarity about how to contemplate the four elements and how to use that in our own life to make it a proper meditation practice. So this is called the longer simile of the elephant's footprint. The sutta before MN27 is called the shorter sutta on the simile's footprint. And the MN27 is also a very beautiful sutta, but not for this time, maybe for another time. And that is a sutta on the gradual training. It was a sutta that was taken to Sri Lanka by Venerable Mahinda. And he taught that to the royal court in Sri Lanka. And then the royal court became stream enters, and they became Buddhist as a consequence of that sutta. But now we're talking about the longer sutta on the simile of the elephant's footprint. And it is an exposition on the four elements. So let's see what this sutta has to say here. So it starts off as usual. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery here. There, Sariputta addressed the monks or the mendicants. Reverence, mendicants. Reverend, they replied, and Sariputta said this. So again, we are in Savatthi, we are in the Jeta Grove Anathapindika's monastery. So many suttas were spoken in this particular monastery here. And they're always very polite to each other. They call each other reverend or something like that. It's kind of nice. Avuso, I think, is the Pali word here. And avuso is kind of a polite way of saying friend or something like that. Maybe it means something like sir. I'm not sure exactly how to translate it. I think reverend is okay. So this is what Venerable Sariputta says. The footprint of all creatures that walk can fit inside an elephant's footprint. So an elephant's footprint is said to be the biggest of them all. In the same way, all skillful qualities can be included in the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the practice leading to the cessation of suffering. So here we have the idea that the Four Noble Truths are like an elephant's footprint, because the elephant leaves a large footprint, and all other beings, the footprint fits inside the elephant's footprint. So all skillful qualities are included in the Noble Truths, Four Noble Truths. What does that mean? It means that if you think about the Four Noble Truths, you think about what they mean. You think about, for example, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is part of that. You know that all good qualities inside of a person. I think the Pali word is all kusala dhamma, and all kusala dhamma, all wholesome qualities, are included within those Four Noble Truths. Anything that you think that is wholesome, that is positive, anything you do, anything you say, is somehow part of these Four Noble Truths. This is one way of looking at this. There is another way of looking at this, because the Pali word kusala dhamma has actually two different meanings. One meaning is that it refers to skillful qualities, but another meaning is that it refers to good teachings. Dhamma can also mean teachings, and kusala dhamma can mean any wholesome teaching. And the good teaching that you hear from the Buddha or Buddhism is a kusala dhamma. So another way of thinking about it is that all good teachings, that there are, fit within the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is like an overall framework, and every other teaching in Buddhism can somehow be understood as falling within the Four Noble Truths. So these are two different ways of thinking about it. One is like the way we talk about the doctrine, the teaching, and the other way is more psychological, the qualities inside of us. All those good qualities inside of us also fall within those Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths, of course, are very important on the Buddhist path, precisely because they are the container that include everything else. And it is always the same. The Four Noble Truths always starts off with the noble truth of suffering. Yeah. And remember that these Four Noble Truths, they are to be understood. Yeah, the idea here is that we're supposed to gain insight into these Four Noble Truths. They're something that we're supposed to realize for ourselves, right? So we're supposed to realize suffering, to understand suffering. This is part of it. Remember what I said at the beginning of the retreat. I said that one way of thinking about the idea of right view is that right view in one way is understanding the difference between happiness and suffering. Yeah, this is what right view is. If you have right view, it means that you know where to look for happiness. You don't look for happiness in the wrong place. So many people in the world look for happiness in the wrong place. Sometimes people look for happiness in doing bad things. They do bad things to gain happiness. But if you really understand where to find happiness, you understand that the spiritual path is completely essential. Yeah, so this is what I was saying at the beginning, understanding happiness and suffering. This is one of the basic idea of right view. And here you have it again. Yeah, the noble truth of suffering is exactly that. It's about understanding suffering. And if you understand suffering, you also understand happiness. Two sides of the same coin. Yeah. So this is kind of the core idea of right view, the idea of suffering and happiness. And of course, once you understand the idea of suffering and you understand happiness, part of that is understanding how these things originate. How do you become happy? How do you suffer? What is the reason for these things? And that is the second noble truth, the origin of suffering, why there is suffering in the world. And of course, we know the answer to the second noble truth is that we suffer because of craving. And the idea that craving causes suffering is explained in dependent origination. Dependent origination is an expansion on the second noble truth. It shows you that craving is factor number 7. Number 8, right? What is it, number 8 in dependent origination? Yeah, so it's factor number 8. So that leads to suffering, because down the track you have rebirth, and then you have old age and suffering and death. But dependent origination also tells you why there is craving. Yeah, why do we crave? And that again is very useful to understand, because when you understand why there is craving, then you can do something about it. And the cause of craving, of course, going into dependent origination all the way to the beginning, is avidya, is ignorance or lack of understanding. So the whole purpose of dependent origination is to show us the causal structure of suffering, why there is suffering in the world, why there is happiness in the world. Yeah, this is the real problem. The origin of suffering is craving. Ultimately, the origin of suffering is ignorance. So we have to eliminate the ignorance. We have to see the world in the right way. This is why Vipassana, seeing things in the right way, becoming wise, is so important, because it destroys the ignorance at the beginning of dependent origination. And because it destroys the ignorance at the beginning, it destroys the craving. And then, of course, suffering itself comes to an end as a consequence. So these are fundamental ways of thinking about the world. Yeah, this is really what this is about. And then you understand the cessation of suffering. Yeah. If you understand that ignorance is the cause of suffering, then the cessation of suffering happens when you become wise, when you give up ignorance, when you give rise to knowledge, when you give rise to insight and understanding. That is when you have the ending of suffering. And then you have the path that leads to the ending of suffering. And this is what we are talking about all the time, this beautiful path of Buddhism, the Noble Eightfold Path, starting with right view, ending with Samma Samadhi. When you have the 4 jhanas, we have seen this just before in the Kaya Gata Sati Sutta, how taking it all the way to the 4 jhanas, then when you have the 4 jhanas, then the insight happens. As a matter of course, it just happens because that is what the 4 jhanas do to you. They give rise to this kind of insight. So that is the Four Noble Truths, and really we should spend a lot more time on those, but I think for now that is sufficient. And now what Venerable Sariputta does, he takes one of those noble truths and then he focuses on that. And then after doing that, he will take one element of the next one and focus on that element. And it goes down like this in many different steps. So it's kind of, I will show you how this kind of expands out in a very kind of nice way. So let's move on to the next paragraph here. Wait, going too far. So now we focus on the first of those Four Noble Truths. And the Buddha and the Venerable Sariputta says, what is the noble truth of suffering? Rebirth is suffering. Old age is suffering. Death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress are suffering. Not getting what you wish for is suffering. In brief, the five grasping aggregates are suffering. Let's stop there, because the next one is really even more subdivided again. So this is the first noble truth. This is what we find in the suttas in so many different places. But you will notice it's a little bit shorter than the usual explanation of the first noble truth. The first noble truth also often has in it the idea that being unified with what you don't like is suffering, or being together, being separated from that which you love, is suffering. That's also often part of this. That is missing here. So this is a slightly different way of expressing the first noble truth. But it's very interesting here, the idea, what is going on here. It starts off by saying, I'm going to comment this only very briefly because otherwise it's going to take too long, but this is a very profound teaching right there. So rebirth is suffering. Usually when this is translated, is it translated as birth is suffering? But actually birth in the context of the Four Noble Truths, it actually means rebirth. And the reason it means rebirth is, remember, we are trying to overcome suffering. And because we are trying to overcome suffering, and we cannot overcome suffering the birth in this life, that's impossible. The only birth we can overcome is the birth in future life. So for that reason, when we see birth in the connection with the first noble truth, it must mean rebirth, right? It must mean future birth. So the correct translation, therefore, actually is rebirth. Well, this is the first aspect here. But even outside of the first noble truth, whenever the word birth occurs in the suttas, we know that birth in ancient India always meant rebirth. When the ancient Indians were talking about birth, they would always understand that as rebirth. So when they were using the word birth, the word jati, they had a very specific idea about that, the idea of rebirth. So if we want to express what the Indians, the ancient Indians, were hearing when they heard the word jati, if we want to express that properly, rebirth is actually the correct translation. So I say that if we're going to use the word jati and translate it, I think rebirth actually is the best way of expressing this. So this is kind of fascinating, right? It's about using language, understanding language in the right way, and then expressing the meaning, what the ancient Indians were thinking, what they were meaning by these terms. We are expressing that rather than using a modern way of thinking and then translating the suttas according to the modern way of thinking. If we are using the modern way of thinking, we lose a lot of the meaning of the ancient suttas. We have to ask ourselves, what were the ancient Indians thinking when they were using these terms? So rebirth is suffering. And once you understand that it is about rebirth that is suffering, you can see that this first noble truth, What it really points to, it points to the future moving on in samsara, the future round the wheel of birth and death. That is really what it is pointing to, because otherwise the word rebirth doesn't make any sense. Yeah, rebirth means we're talking about the wheel of existence, the wheel of carrying on, birth and death, carrying on into the future. We're talking about samsaric existence, really. Once you have rebirth, you have old age, yeah, the falling apart of the body, getting weak, the sights and everything failing, the memory getting worse. Sometimes I feel that my memory is getting a bit worse already. I think already, wow, I'm not ready to die yet. I want to live a little bit longer. My memory already failing a little bit sometimes. I feel this is kind of no good, yeah. And how old I am again? Well, I'm getting much older now, so maybe it is okay if memory fails a tiny little bit sometimes. But you don't want it to happen too fast. Getting old, yeah, is not nice because you compare yourself to the way you were before. It is suffering for most people. Death is suffering, yeah, one of the very important aspects of human life. The idea that you have to give up everything in the world. Everything has to go. Not only that, but you're also heading to an uncertain future. So you want to have a safeguard against those things. And that is very much a very large part of what we're doing on the Buddhist path. Death deserves a lot of mention, but I will keep it very brief just for now, otherwise it's going to take us too long here. Then we have sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress are suffering. That's quite obvious, yeah? But remember that these things are inherent part of human life. Everyone has to have these things. And because they are inherent to human life, you cannot avoid them. That is why they are really problematic. Not getting what you want is suffering. Life is one long sequence of not getting what you want. You know what I mean? You never get exactly what you want. Life always throws up all kinds of challenges. You always have to settle kind of in a halfway house with half measures. You never get everything that you want. There's always disappointments. And this is another part of an aspect of life that has to be this way. Life is never going to be perfect. And when you don't get what you want, it is suffering. There's a gap between where you want to be and what you actually get. And then comes the last part of this. In brief, the 5 grasping aggregates are suffering. And this is like a summary of the entire idea of suffering. And of course, the 5 grasping aggregates, they are what we are. These are the aspects of our personality. And because they are the aspects of our personality, what this is saying, and this is a very profound truth, right? This is really, really profound and really hard to understand for many people. But what this is saying, it is really saying that existence itself is suffering. Existence is problematic because these 5 aggregates, the grasping aggregates, they are what constitutes existence itself. So this is really what the brief summary of this teaching is, and that gives you kind of the outlook that you need to understand what is going on here. So we had just had a look at the idea of the first noble truth, which is the idea of suffering. And as I just mentioned, that the brief expression of that is that the 5 grasping aggregates, or if you like, the 5 aggregates that are grasped, they are suffering. So then Sariputta, he takes these 5 aggregates and he looks at one of the aggregate. He's always going on to, he has a long list and then he chooses one item on that list. And now he chooses one item and then he says, well, he chooses one item from suffering, that's the 5 aggregates. And he says, what are the 5 grasping aggregates? They are as follows: the grasping aggregates of form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. So I assume that you are reasonably, you know roughly what the 5 aggregates are. Form is basically the body. Feeling is whether an experience is good, bad, or neutral. Perception is how we relate to the world, how we can understand the world. Choices is our intention, the will, how we try to create the world around us by doing and all of these kind of things. And consciousness is just the ability to be aware, to be aware of what is happening, to be conscious of the world around us. So the reason why the Buddha talks about these 5 aggregates, it's basically to help us to focus in on certain aspects of existence where we need to have insight. This is where the self resides. The self, the feeling of self resides mostly in one of these 5 aggregates. And this is one of the main reasons why the Buddha talks about this. So then he goes to one of the 5 aggregates. What is the grasping aggregate of form? And he says it is the 4 primary elements and form derived from the 4 primary elements. And of course, the 4 primary elements, these are the same things that we saw in the previous sutta, the sutta on mindfulness directed to the body. This is the earth element, 4 primary, the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. So now you can see the connection between this sutta and the previous one. And also it is form derived from those 4 primary elements. So this would be anything really in the physical world that somehow is made up of these 4 elements. And one of the things that is meant here specifically is the 5 senses. The 5 senses are a particular kind of form. The eye is a form which is sensitive to light, so we can see. The ear is an organ that is sensitive to vibrations of the air, and that's why we can hear. So this is like the derived form, but the main purpose here is to look at the 4 primary elements. What are the 4 primary elements? The elements of earth, water, fire, and air. What is the earth element? So you can see how the Buddha, how Venerable Sariputta is working here. He starts with the 4 noble truths. Then he focuses on the first noble truth of suffering, and he says that the first noble truth of suffering, what that is. He focuses on the 5 aggregates. He asks, what are the 5 aggregates? He focuses on the form aggregate. He asks, what is the form aggregate? It is the 4 primary elements. He says, what are the 4 primary elements? And then he focuses on the earth element, going down, 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 narrowing down, focusing on one individual thing here. And of course, the interesting thing is that if we focus on one small area like that, one individual thing, it is surprising how much insight you can gain by focusing on a small thing, just like the earth element. And this is why we're going to consider this earth element in quite a bit of detail now. What is the earth element? And Venerable Sariputta says the earth element may be interior or exterior. What is the interior earth element? Anything hard, solid, appropriated, that's internal, pertaining to the individual. This includes head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, undigested food, feces, or anything else, hard, solid, appropriated, that is internal, pertaining to the individual. This is called the internal earth element. So it starts off by saying there is the external element and the internal earth element. The internal earth element is basically your body. You can see it is your body. That long list of things are all things that relate to the body. Whereas the external earth element is the whole world outside. It is other people, but also the whole world, as far as it is solid, as far as it has some kind of solidity attached to it. Yeah. And then so the internal element, the internal earth element, the interior earth element is whatever is solid within you, that is hard, yeah, and that is appropriated. And the word appropriated here is the Pali word upadinna. It means that you are grasping these things. Yeah, upadinna is related to the word upadana, and upadana, of course, has this idea of attaching to things, of appropriating, of taking hold of things, yeah, or of seizing something. And in dependent origination, it goes from feeling to craving, and then it has upadana. So when you crave, what you do is you take things up, you appropriate things, you take hold of things in the world. Why do you do that? Because you want to satisfy your craving. That is why we take hold of things in the world. We take hold of relationships. We take hold of a house, of possessions. We take hold of ideas, of viewpoints. Yeah, we have views. We say Buddhism is the best, right? That is the view of Buddhists. We think Buddhism is the best. And are we right? Well, hopefully we are right, yeah, because if we're not right, then we have a problem. But we tend to think Buddhism that's just our view when you're a Buddhist. If you didn't think Buddhism was the best, you wouldn't bother being a Buddhist. You'd be something else. This is the whole point of being a Buddhist. So these are the things we appropriate. This is what upadana is all about. And one of the things that we appropriate is all the physical ideas of the body. This is mine. This is me. Don't touch me. Yeah, this is my body. Leave it alone. We have appropriated this body. It is mine. And then you start to analyze this body, all of these solid things, and you start to see that it has all of these elements, yeah, from head hair going all the way down to feces and anything else that is hard and solid. And of course, the list that you see here is exactly the same list, or it is a sub aspect or a subset of the list that we saw before. The list that we saw before had 31 parts. This has less. I haven't counted, not sure how many there is. Because these are all the hard, the solid aspects of the 31 parts of the body. This is the interior earth element. And now comes the inside part, yeah, the thing that we should reflect on. So Venerable Sariputta says that the interior earth element and the exterior earth element are just the earth element. This should be seen, truly seen with right understanding like this. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. When you truly see with right understanding, you grow disillusioned or you grow repelled. You are repelled by the earth element. You are detaching the mind from the earth element. And this is this idea I was talking about before, yeah? When you realize that your body is actually the same as the earth elements outside. Where does your body come from? It comes from eating the plants. What are the plants? The plants have grown from the soil. They take up the nutriment in the soil. They take up the air outside. They use the sunlight for photosynthesis. They take up all the elements in the world. Then they become food for us. We eat that food. Then you have this body. It is made of all of these things from the outside. And then eventually the body goes back to this world when you die. Yeah, everything going back to the elements. And then when you die, you decompose in the ground or they burn you in the cemetery. Sometimes we use the ashes when someone is dead and we put it under a tree so the trees will grow better. It becomes nutriment for the next tree. And so the cycle just goes on and on like this. And there is really no distinction between what is dead and what is alive. Everything is the same thing. Your body and the external world are one and the same thing. So why are you holding on to this body? Why do you think it is yours? It belongs to nature. It doesn't belong to you at all. It is not that it belongs to other people either. It doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to nature. It is part of the way that nature behaves. Sometimes nature creates these bodies. How does nature create these bodies? Well, it is through the Darwinian laws, of evolution, and through the Darwinian laws of evolution, through genetics and all of this, these bodies come into existence. This is how animal bodies come into existence. It is all part of nature. So this is how you do this kind of contemplation. It's a very simple contemplation. It's really understanding in a deep way that you are not separate from the nature around you. Your physical body is just the same as the nature around you. Your mind is different. Your consciousness is not the same as nature around you. Your mind is different, but the physical body is not. And when you see that, you see this physical body being built up of the world around you. You eat porridge, or you eat rice or whatever it is to make you feel strong. And then eventually things go back to rice and porridge again. Your body becomes the rice and porridge of the next person. And it goes on in cycles like that. And when you reflect like that, you think, what is it I'm holding on to? I'm holding on to nothing. I'm holding on to something that doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the world around. It belongs to the nature around me. And then you gain this right understanding. This is not mine. I cannot hold on to this body. I have very little control over it. If you don't want to grow old and you don't want to die, it doesn't make any difference. You're still going to become old and die. There's not something you can do about that. In the meantime, you can kind of move this body a little bit, but at the end of the day, it is not really yours. Body does not belong to you. I am not this. Definitely, you are not the body. You are not. This is not myself. And the reason it is not yourself is precisely because it is out of control. One day you're going to have to give it all up, and so this body is almost like alien to you. And you need to be able to grasp this. You have to think about it quite a lot. You have to reflect on it again and again. All of the reflections in the Buddhist suttas are not reflections that you do once and you are finished with it, but these are reflections that you do over a long period of time. And as you do it over a long period of time, that is when it starts to kind of gather a certain momentum and it starts to work. So this is what this really is all about. This is how you practice these kind of insights. Okay, so just Bobby, I'm supposed to go on to 3 o'clock, is that right? And then
yes, Ajahn.
Yeah, okay. And then we have a longer break, or do we have a Q? We have a Q&A first of all, that's right. Okay, so yeah. Okay,
Q&A.
sorry, just losing track of time here a little bit. So, okay. So this is how you reflect on these things. But remember, as I'm saying, these are not simple insights. These are things that take time. It takes time to get used to these kind of ideas of your body being part of the earth around you. So you have to do it again and again and again. And gradually that reality starts to seep in. And as you start to seep in, you lose interest in this body. It starts to feel like alien. It starts to feel almost like, why am I holding on to this body? And then as you start to become disillusioned with the body, you detach. The mind becomes separated from the earth element. And when it becomes separated from the earth element, it actually becomes separated from the entire body. It is detaching from that. You no longer regard this body in the same way. And this is very powerful when you do this. Because if you do this in the right way and you see the detaching from that body, it means again that you are able to attain samadhi. You are able to watch the breath. You're able to gain all the peace and all the happiness, all these wonderful things on the path. Why? Because the biggest obstacle to meditation has been left behind. And that is really what we're doing here. So let's carry on with the earth element. There's quite a bit more to be talked about with the earth element. And so then Venerable Sariputta says, there comes a time when the exterior water element is disturbed or it flares up. At that time, the exterior earth element vanishes. So, for all its great age, the earth element be revealed as impermanent, liable to end, vanish, and perish. What then of this ephemeral body, appropriated by craving? Rather than take it to be I or mind or I am, they still just consider it to be none of these things. So this is, in a sense, a even more profound way of thinking about the earth element. Yeah, we know that eventually the earth element, as such, the whole of the earth element will eventually disappear. Yeah, and we know this in a number of ways. I think one of the way that is mentioned here is maybe when there is I'm not sure exactly what this means, to be perfectly honest with you, the idea that the water element flares up, but it may be that there are times in the history of the world when the whole earth is water. Yeah, there's nothing but water all the way around. I'm not sure if such times have existed if you look at geological history, whether there have been times when the whole earth has been underwater. I'm not sure, but there may be such times, yeah, when everything is just water over the whole earth. And of course, then the earth element is gone. The earth element is submerged. And when the earth element is submerged like that, it is impossible to be a human being on this planet. So in one way, the earth element can be said to have disappeared. Yeah, it has vanished because it can no longer be seen, and it's possible to survive as a human being on the earth in that kind of way. But there is another sutta which talks about this in an even more profound way, and this is the Seven Sons Sutta, found in the Anguttara Sevens. And what this sutta says is that it says there will come a time in the future when the sun starts to expand and the world becomes warmer and warmer and warmer, until eventually all the life on the earth is destroyed, until eventually all the oceans in the world evaporate, and until eventually the whole earth itself burns up and the whole earth is gone. Yeah, and that certainly, if the whole earth burns up and the whole earth is gone, well, that is definitely the impermanence of the earth element. And what is so interesting about that Seven Sons Sutta is that it is precisely what we know will happen according to modern cosmology. According to modern cosmology, we know that the earth will eventually burn up. We know that eventually the sun will expand so much that it is likely to engulf the entire earth, and the earth will become almost part of the sun, and then it will disintegrate completely. So that sutta is very, very interesting because it seems that the Buddha had an insight into modern cosmology that has only been discovered very recently. How could the Buddha know these things? It is kind of amazing that the Buddha could have some kind of insight into these things. And so this is another way of thinking about the idea of the external earth element vanishing. Yeah, it is not permanent, it is uncertain. We don't know what is going to happen to this external earth element. And you could take it even further. You could take it to the point of maybe thinking about the universal cycles of the universe expanding and contracting. And when the universe contracts, again, at that point, when it contracts, all the material in the entire universe is likely to burn up, yeah, and to not exist anymore. We will exist in another way. There will be just fire and heat and not really any earth element in the way that we normally think about this. So the earth element is very unstable. It never lasts, yeah? And then Venerable Sariputta says precisely this. Well, if this great earth element, if that is impermanent and liable to vanish and perish, then what about this body of ours? Yeah, this body is far more impermanent, far more liable to perish, far more liable to vanish than the external element. So because it is so ephemeral, because it is so unreliable, because we cannot hold on to it, even though we have appropriated it by craving, as it says here, even though we're trying to say this is mine, that is impossible because it is so unreliable. And then again, rather than thinking of this as I, mine, or I am, we consider it as none of those things. We relinquish the earth element because we know how unstable it actually is. And then comes some of the benefits of thinking about the earth element in this way. And Venerable Sariputta, he says here that if other people abuse, attack, harass, or trouble that mendicant, then they understand. This painful feeling born of ear contact has arisen in me. That is dependent, not independent. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. They see that contact, the feeling, the perception, the choices, and the consciousness as impermanent. Based on that element alone, their mind becomes eager, confident, settled, and decided. So what is going on here? So what is going on here is that, first of all, you have a typical situation like everyone sometimes experience in this world. You are abused by somebody or troubled by someone or harassed by somebody. This life is full of this. Yeah, life is full of people saying unpleasant things and doing the wrong thing. Everyone in this world experiences this to some extent. And of course, those things are painful. Yeah. And then he says, well, this painful feeling that comes from this, it is arisen because of ear contact. It is arisen because you have an ear. And when you have an ear, you have no choice but to, that ear will connect with the sounds or will connect with the earth outside. And so you will hear sounds. And when you hear sounds, well, then you can expect to be abused and you can expect to be harassed because that is part of hearing sounds. Yeah. This is why these things happen. And so even this beginning here is actually very interesting because what it means is that the moment you have an ear, the moment we have these sensory organs, the consequence of having sensory organs is that there will be painful feelings. All the sensory organs bring with them both happy feelings and painful feelings. That is the nature of these things. And what you are having here, you are hearing abuse, you are hearing harassment from the outside, you're being attacked by others. That is what you can expect when you have ears. And there's something very beautiful. It may not sound very beautiful to be attacked and harassed, but there's something very profound about understanding it in this way. Because when you understand it in this way, it becomes impersonal. If we think that the other person is attacking us, if we think that the other person is abusing us, then it is personal and we get angry with the other person in return, right? But when we understand that this is just the nature of reality, this other person is just an agent of the world, an agent of nature that carries out what nature does. They don't really want to attack us. They don't know what they're doing. They are walking in darkness. They are ignorant, just like everyone else. And then they create this painful feeling inside of us without understanding what is happening. It is just nature that is happening. And when nature is happening, because we have ears, we will have painful feeling as a consequence. So this takes away the personality behind this. We no longer get upset with the other person because we know actually it is not about the other person. It is about nature behaving in a certain way. And this is a beautiful way of thinking because it takes away the basis for getting angry. It takes away the basis for getting upset and irritated. And instead, when you see that, you can actually either just remain neutral. You have the upekkha, you have the equanimity that you have when you think in a neutral way, or you can even have compassion for the other person because you understand that the other person doesn't really know what they're doing here. They are walking in darkness. They're just following habits. They're just doing things in a blind kind of way. And when you see this, then you become cool. You don't take these things so seriously anymore. So you know it is dependent. It is not independent. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. As long as you experience the world, as long as you hear, you will experience these things. There is no choice in the matter. This is the way things are. It is dependent on that contact. It will always happen when you have contact. In fact, I would like to sometimes to retranslate the word contact. The word contact in Pali is passa. Passa, again, one of these terms we find in dependent origination. It is the sixth factor in dependent origination. And sometimes, instead of translating it as contact, which to me is a little bit hard to understand. What does it mean to contact? It means you come into contact with something. Yeah? It is like the initial experience. When you experience something initially, it's like contact. But contact in the Buddhist idea is more like, it's very similar to the idea of experience. Yeah. So one way of talking about this is to say that, well, the reason I feel painful feeling, it is dependent on experience. So you can translate contact as experience, or you can translate passa as experience rather than contact. And then it is easier to understand in many ways, yeah, because experiencing the world, okay, that we all understand what that means. Contacting the world is a bit more, not entirely, not 100% clear what is meant. Okay, we know roughly what it means, but it's hard to pin down. But when we use the word experience, it is very obvious. So you experience the world. When you experience the world, there will be feelings. When there's feelings, there is craving. When there's craving, there is taking up, there's upadana, etc., etc. So you contact the world, you experience the world, yeah? And then you see that experience that you have, that feeling, that perception, those choices, the consciousness, all of that is impermanent. All of that is impermanent because if the experience is impermanent, if the contact is impermanent, then all of the five khandhas that come with that contact, that too is impermanent. Yeah, it goes. So it is no longer interesting. Yeah? It is not important. You don't take it seriously if you are abused or attacked, because you know it is the play of the world, the play of the five senses, the play of the five khandhas, doing their thing according to nature, and there's nothing much you can do about it. And when you understand this, then based on that element, the element here is the element of form, understanding the nature of form, you abandon it. You give it up, and because you give it up, your mind becomes peaceful, meditation is possible, and then your mind becomes eager, confident, and settled, and decided. Yeah, these again are the words that indicate a samadhi experience. So from that understanding of the earth element, again, you attain samadhi as a consequence. You can see how similar this is to the previous sutta, right? The previous sutta had very similar ideas. You contemplate the body, you do the body contemplation, and when you do the body contemplation, samadhi is the outcome. Here we are seeing exactly the same thing, but here it is expanded out. Yeah, here it shows you how you think about these things. And when you think about these things in this way, if you do the element contemplation like this, then samadhi is the outcome.